Greetings, Management 1010 interdisciplinary leadership students. This is our last day of just floating through the vapors, right? Of fall break. Maybe we should switch to something a little more fallish, right? But I hope you're outside enjoying some autumn air, also looking ahead at your homework assignments. But I wanted to touch base with you as we get ready to come back from fall break and start further into our semester, right? We start week 8 this week, and it's just a little half week, so you can do it, right? You can persevere on. Okay, things that are coming ahead. You know that you have your Unit 6 quiz is due. I believe that's tonight. Have to look at the due dates in the system. You can take those quizzes unlimited time, so you want to get that score up. In fact, you've got to meet that minimum score requirement, right? So don't delay. Make sure you're submitting the quiz, looking at your grade, going back out, and making another attempt to get the best grade possible. Now, in addition to that, you then have exam number 1 that's coming up. Sent you a video on that, so you have the instructions there. Those, of course, are out there in pause, and you can start preparing yourself for that and scheduling a time where if you need to come to campus, you know that the facilities are open and available to you because you check those things, making sure you have, time to dedicate to those questions. On top of that, your grades are posted for writing assignment number 3, which was my favorite movie, Iron-Jawed Angels. And as I graded this assignment, there was one common problem that really went through all of, it seemed like almost everybody, many of the students anyway. So I wanted to give you some feedback so that you can take that and apply that to your next assignment. The first 2 writing assignments, you were really boxed into a form, and now I'm starting to release a little bit because I'm trying to get you now to kind of develop your thoughts a little bit more and really make those connections. And with this Iron-Jawed Angels that's out there on YouTube and you can watch, I mean, these are rich experiences. They're filled with imagery of leadership, and they give us a real opportunity to take the frameworks, the leadership frameworks that we study and that we read about in our textbook, and see them demonstrated in real life. Iron-Jawed Angels is a real story. The Hotel Rwanda, a real story. So the things that you're studying and evaluating, these are examples where people really had to reach within, multiple people within these scenarios, led in a variety of styles. So again, I wanted to give you some feedback. First thing I want to start off with is this cover page, and I wonder how many of you really took time to look at this, because really in my personal note to you, I kind of gave away one of the answers here. First of all, this is one of my favorite movies because it is so rich with leadership examples, and as you go through there, and it's real tempting to say because we're following the young suffragist, and by the time we get to the end of the movie and I ask you a question about the difference between the two, you kind of say, oh, they're these stuffy old people and they just sit in this back room. If that was how you viewed it, I would encourage you to go to that last clip of the movie, right? Where it's all coming together, right? Who was it that won the war? Right? You can win little battles along the way. You can lose little battles along the way. You might argue that the younger suffragist in Iron-Jawed Angels, they did a lot, certainly, and they sacrificed a lot, and they made tremendous inroads. But who was sitting in the president's office at the very end, and who really solidified the deal to the point that when they're voting on it in Congress, who is it that ultimately comes back and teams up together? I just want you to think about that and to watch the movie again. I might have gone into it with a preconception that the youth is always the correct way and they're the winners. I want you to look at that again and how that played out. It kind of gave you that away in my personal notes, but yet many of you missed that. Okay, so you can go through and read that particular part, but I did want to point that out. Now, here becomes the real big common themes as we go from one question to another. When I asked you the question, first of all in big bold letters, and I'm glad that you got this, I said give a specific example. Okay, I'm looking at question number 1, part A. Give a specific example. In part B, give a specific example. Now, the first common mistake that I saw was you gave very generalized examples. There is a difference between talking about a key event and saying They sacrificed. Lots of people sacrifice. That's not sufficient. You have got to give explicit detail. Have I seen the movie? I've seen the movie. Your job is to explain it to me as if I hadn't. Tell me what about that example made you choose it. Why is it there? How did they demonstrate these key principles that I've asked you to talk about? Now let's go on to the next point, okay? If you got that right. Now, giving the specifics, I would say maybe a fourth of the students who struggled with that, but almost everybody struggled with referencing specific methods outlined by the authors. This is what I need you to do. I need you to do it in this assignment. I need you to do it as we go forward. When we watch a leadership example, Iron Jawed Angels or Hotel Rwanda, we cannot watch it with the same set of eyes and the same concepts that we watched it with prior to ever having a course on leadership. We can't just sit back and say, well, that's interesting, yeah, that's strong, that's all right, right? We can't watch it like that. We have to use our education. What a lot of students did is as soon as I started asking you for the examples, you took the readings and you threw them out the window and said they don't really apply anymore, and I want to read you the instructions. Give an example of how she identified, we're talking about Alice Paul, common ground by referencing specific methods outlined by these two authors. That's part A. Part B, give a specific example of how she made the experience meaningful to the hearer's own experience by referencing specific methods outlined, in this case, by Greenleaf, right? I want to know from the reading how these people demonstrated this. And I actually had one person said, well, yeah, they used the book or something to that extent. These people had no idea. I don't think Greenleaf was yet alive. Okay, so here's what's fascinating. There was successful leadership. The leadership demonstrates these examples, these frameworks. Talk about both the detailed specific example and the framework of leadership, and then connect the two things together. That's what I need you to do. Let me give you a couple examples. I've got some before me. And if you're the student, then kudos to you, because I'm going to read two different students' work that I thought was good. The first answer says, Alice Paul made the issue of women's suffrage meaningful to the women factory workers by identifying the suffrage they share. As women in society have unequal rights to vote, as men as being no different than the unequal abuse they share on their own jobs. She used the method communicating a vision outlined by, I'm not exactly sure how to say his name, Cowes and Posner, to help the women realize that suffrage is them, living, breathing women. She shared her hope and dream to them by emotionally expressive, optimistic, and by being emotionally expressive, optimistic, and uplifting. She appealed to the women's personal convictions. Okay, do you see how they described the method, though, of communicating a vision? And as I read that, and I stumbled a little bit, I apologize. Did you not feel that vision? That's what I'm talking about. So there's the example, there's the concept of communicating the vision, and the two connected together. Let me give you another example. A specific example, this is again question 1, part A, a specific example of how Alice identified common ground by referencing specific methods was when Alice told the factory worker, Ruza, that the ruling class had a voice, and a voice was a vote, and that no one heard her. It compelled the workers to grab the set of flyers and the cause, right? So what is the method? Identifying common ground. So she's bringing that back in. I would have liked to seen that beefed up just a little bit more, to tell you the truth. Okay, so I think I got to go back through my examples. Now, let's go a little bit further. So you could say the same thing for part B. Or for question number 2. Okay, let me go on to question number 2, because the same problem followed, I would say most of you, into question number 2. Again, you're asked to give a specific example of how Alice Paul identified common ground by referencing specific methods. Part B, give a specific example. I'm using specific a lot. Does that ring a little? Okay. Specific example made the experience meaningful to the hearer's own experience by referencing specific methods outlined, in that case, by Greenleaf. Okay, let me use a Greenleaf example this time. This student says, Alice uses Greenleaf's method of acceptance and empathy when speaking with the president. She was objective to his, she objected, I think you meant to say, she objected to his cause on tariff reform bill and accepted it by relating it to the women's suffrage cause on equal rights to the vote. So you see how, again, here there's an example, there's a concept, acceptance and empathy, and they're tied together. Okay, probably doing a worse job of reading it. I apologize. Okay, now let me go a little bit further, and this was one that really concerned me, and I'm going to show you some images of this on the screen if I have a way. Let me see if I can. My computer's moving very slowly. There we can. There we go. Let me see if I can show you this on my screen. Well, I'm not sure. Oops. Okay. I'm not sure if it's doing it or not, so I'm going to talk as if it's nice, as if it's doing it, as if it's acting nice is what I was thinking. If you go to Google and type in images of righteousness, that's what we're talking about here, right? You are going to see shields, swords, breastplates, right? Boots of armor, right? Because righteousness is something that is fought for throughout history, right? Can you agree with that? The Knights of the Round Table. If you think about our statue of Lady Liberty, she's holding a sword. She's not holding a pillow. Okay, so you fight for what is right, and you're victorious because you are right. And that is the symbol that Inez Mulholland, a leader in the NAWSA, is conveying. She sits atop a white horse. She is flowing in a white garb. And again, if you go out to Google and you search for this, you'll even see, I'm not sure if you can see my screen at this point or not. If not, I'll at the end of this video, I'll tack on some of these images so that you can see it, where white robes are being placed on somebody. Now, why is this? Because these are symbols of purity and righteousness and fighting for what is right, and we will not be conquered by evil, right? This is what Inez is demonstrating and what the whole intent of the parade was. Now, what about the wings? Because I asked you about that. I asked you about Inez sitting atop a white horse, well, wearing a crown. Let's start with a crown. Okay, so wearing a crown. It says that a crown... Wait, oh, yeah, okay. I'm sorry. It says that a crown is a circular ornamental headdress worn by a monarch as a symbol of authority, usually made of decorated precious metals, right? It symbolizes authority, a sovereign rule. You are the head of all that you survey, right? You are the leader. You are in charge. And what is she in charge of? Everything that is right, that's sitting atop the white horse, cloaked in white, right? Now, I also ask you about the wings. We talked about the sword. Now, again, the sword of justice, the battle armor, right? So what about the wings? Again, just go to Google. You get half a dozen links on what are the meanings of wings. Well, you know, there's so many things here, and you could go to many of these sites. What are you use wings for? You use wings to fly, to be elevated, right? So that you are high and above. It's freedom. And what is the freedom that they're asking for? The freedom, the right to vote, right? So they're flying. Now there are many of these images that you could go to, but you know, but that's really what we're talking about. One of the things, I was looking at my little special effects here, and as we think about in our culture, angels and demons, right? Aren't the demons the fallen angels, and don't the angels have wings to fly, right? So they're up there and they're flying. They are uplifted, right? And that's what Inez is conveying. Many of you said to me, and quite a few students, so I'm not talking about any one student, and I do see this every semester, said to me that the symbol of Inez on the horse is evil. And I always look at my instructions to see if I've somehow led you astray on that, but to me, as you look at the history and you look at what our society, the images that our society looks at as good and evil and all, it is clearly a portrayal of what is good and pure and righteousness and fighting for the right thing. So I would encourage you to kind of re-examine that a little bit, because there's maybe something that maybe I said something wrong in the instructions, but definitely the conveyance here is of good. Now, when I was trying to think about when I talk about the crown and all this, okay, if I put a hat on, put my cowboy hat on, right? Okay, yeah, that's a functional hat, and maybe I even look a little funny, and so you can see that, right? But isn't it different if I instead wear a crown? The crown, who wears a crown? Kings, queens, royalty, people who are in control, the sovereign, right? I convey something totally different. But look at this, right? These hats have symbols. They have meaning that go with them, right? And so that crown is not a mark of evil. It's really not. Again, Inez Mulholland sitting on a white horse, wearing white with angel's wings, holding a sword, put all that imagery together, and I think you'll start to kind of understand, how this fits together. Okay, so that part I really wanted to touch on. Now, another thing that many students missed was part B of this exact same question, where I'm talking about the imagery. Because what I said to you is, based on the ethics communicated by this image, how would you act? And many of you said, well, this is an interesting situation, and it seems very unfair, and I certainly am all for fairness, and I'm not for unfairness, right? Folks, you're straddling the line here, and I think that there's a temptation to do that so that you'll never be wrong. And you can't do that. You have to use your education, you have to use the knowledge that's in that book to come to a decisive decision, and then you have to support it with the readings, okay? So I'm asking you how you would act. Well, here's this symbol of good and righteousness and fighting for what is right. And when these people of this day are standing on the street, they're seeing images of Joan of Arc, knights of the Round Table, soldiers of victorious battles on that horse. And what does that stir in you? It stirs the call to action, right? Some of the people standing along the sideline pull into the parade to march. You say, yes, but a riot started. Why did that riot start? Because there was a call to action. And when the good swelled up, the evil swelled up, and it caused the conflict. Do you see the imagery there? Now, what could she have done? And some of you said she should never have done that. Several of you said that. You said she should have just been nice. Wait, but aren't you the same people who told me later on that the older women suffragists who took a more passive approach, that they were old, stodgy people who weren't doing enough action? Might have to think about, sorry about that, my computer is putting up a little reminder bell, but we can't be on both sides. We can't say she was wrong to take action for a cause that was right, and that makes her evil, but these other people should have taken action. We can't do that, folks. You got to make a commitment to it, and I think you can. Now, this is fun, but I'm just trying to explain this to you from an academic perspective so you can kind of see how all this imagery and this whole storyline works together to support our study of leadership, okay? So I'm not trying to offend anybody, I'm really not, and I am asking you on some of your opinions on these things, and so I really just try to offer explanation of a way to view the story, okay? And I think you'll see that in the points, because I really did not deduct, in an outstanding way. Just to go back to question number 3 here before I move on, let me give you this student's explanation. It says, the image of Inez on the horse immediately brought to mind a tone of innocence, that's in quotes. To look upon Inez's face and see the innocence and the good reflecting in her face was a powerful image, and it was supposed to be powerful. That's why they did that, not just for the movie, in real life. But as you continued to look, you also saw strength, right? The horse, the battle, the strength, and purpose. There's a cause. You could see a warrior fighting for what was right. The image made me think of war times. Well, isn't it a battle, right? I'm saying this is very good, because isn't that right? You're going into battle, and the purpose is victory of the vote. The women were fighting a battle for what was right and just. That's the imagery, right? Inez stood for strength and courage. Follow me, right? Doesn't the leader say, follow me? They don't say, go on, y'all, go on ahead. No, follow me, right? The image of her sitting on the horse spoke to people in all kinds of different ways. Some people empathized with the women, but the majority, most of whom were men, felt violated and hurt, right? So it's evoking emotion in them as well. Their world is about to change. What happens at the end of this battle, right? Okay, so you kind of start to understand that. So let me move on here to the final question. But again, I hope you're seeing some themes so that as you watch the next movie, you understand the importance of bringing that framework and a lot of the imagery that you'll see into our leadership discussion. Okay, so the very last question was, again, identify one of the 10 principles described by Bennis and give an example. Identify one of the 10 principles, again, described by Bennis and give an example. The first example was for the young suffragist. The second example was for the older suffragist. What many of you did is simply type an example, not what was asked for. Identify one of the 10 principles, okay? You've got to make the connection. You got to show me that you're reading. You got to show me that you saw what you're reading in the movie and make that connection, okay? So, again, you know, nothing was over the top bad. That's not my intent to tell you. You know, I appreciate you're doing good work, and I could tell many of you enjoyed the movie and that you are watching it and getting caught up in the passion of the movie. But I want you to make sure you bring your academic framework of leadership into this. There are many leadership styles. We want to see how these things are being applied. When was it applied successfully? When maybe not so much? Maybe there should have been a different principle applied at a certain moment. In our very beginning movie, 12 O'Clock High, you certainly saw the advantages and disadvantages of a softer, more personable leader compared to one who's very rules-driven, and they each were successful at different times, right? Now in this movie, you also see different leadership styles. The older suffragists were working within the system. It was a slow, painstaking process. But what about the strife that the younger suffragist went through, right? It was hot and it was burning and it made progress. But by the end, when you see these two women together, I think the younger were you know, maybe a little defeated. They needed the strength and the stability of the older suffragist, okay? Obviously, I do enjoy this movie, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. 12 Angry Men will be it. An eyeful, I'd say an earful, an eyeful, right? So make sure you have your questions, make sure you've done your reading, but we'll get to that later. Right now, unit quiz number 6 and exam number 1. Thanks, and we'll be talking to you soon, okay? Bye-bye.